gonna pop in at some point because he was interested in some of the topics that we're going to cover today. Okay, so Sarah's having some internet issues, so yeah, let's get started. So we definitely wanted to talk about, like the end of the year and how a lot of people's goals for 2021 have sort of come and gone, and we're sort of moving into a new period of training for a lot of athletes with spring races coming up, summer races coming up. We've talked a little bit about taking an off season or dialing back mileage, focusing on family over the holidays, things like that. And so I think the next step in this conversation is to really talk about finding your why in terms of goals for 2022 and how to set short and long-term goals. So we can get started there. I think finding your why and having that is super important, because there are definitely days where it's 12 degrees outside and there's a 30-degree below zero wind chill, which, like, thank God it's a Monday, because I don't run on Mondays. I'm not going outside. Not going to happen. If it was a Tuesday, however, I would have to figure something out. I know that I have an athlete on the call, Steve, who lives in Wyoming. He is basically my neighbor and has been experiencing a lot of really terrible weather lately as well. We're talking like 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts with, below freezing temperatures. And so having your why and holding on to that is so, so important for continuing training, getting out the door, staying motivated. And that's something that I really want to talk about. So I think, oh, hey, TJ. I think that we can get started with this idea of finding your why and setting goals. And one thing that I've found as a way to set your goal, figure out what your why is. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I know that, you can do a quick Google search or have a conversation with a friend, but I think like the three most important questions to ask yourself is just like sit down, grab a notepad and a pen and ask yourself, like, why do I want to run? And then your answer should be something like, I want to run because blank, and you fill in that blank because it makes you feel good, because it helps you become a better version of yourself, because you like setting goals, because you want to see what you're capable of. You want to tap into that potential and figure out where the ceiling's at. Another important question is asking, why is running important to you? What does it mean to you? So running is important to me because it's the only time I have during the day to get out of my own head, or it's a break from reality, it's a break from work, it's a break from my kids, it could be a lot of things. So the third point here I like asking is, how does running make you feel? Running makes me feel good. It makes me feel confident, empowered. It makes me feel fast. It makes me feel capable. I feel like the way running makes you feel, a good run, makes you feel, the thought of that will get you through anything, like whether you're mile 98 in a 100-miler, like you will push through the end of that. So those are just three questions that I like to ask myself. I like to sit down at the end of every year and kind of go through this, because as seasons change, as life circumstances change, your why might change. It's not going to be the same as it was 2 years ago. It's not going to be the same 5 years from now as it is today. So I think taking the time to sit down and really like tap into that is super important. Drew, do you have anything that you want to add, or have any other like questions to add to this list?
Well, not too much, although I just want to reiterate that you're absolutely correct. A lot of people that I've worked with in the past think that your why is like why you run generally. And it can be kind of like what Kristen was talking about, but your why, like Kristen said, can change from training cycle to training cycle. It doesn't even have to be a 1 or every 2 year kind of thing. Like literally every time you start a new training block, it's an important thing to sit down and discuss with yourself, maybe discuss with your coach, just so you're refreshed and your mind is in the right place when you're beginning something new. I like the concept, again, worth reiterating. And then kind of, we've talked about before, like not just finding your why, but remembering why you're running in the midst of a training block as well. Sometimes it's easy to get disoriented or confused, or just like you get to the point where maybe you have a bad couple workouts in a row and you're like, why am I doing this? This isn't even worth it. And you start having those negative thoughts run through your head. Again, why it's so important to stay focused and stay motivated and practice positive self-talk and really, I guess, just keep the ball rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like Drew said, if you have a string of less than ideal runs or a couple bad workouts, it's really easy to fall into the what am I doing? Why does this matter? Spiral. And having a why will definitely, I think to me, like having a why is like a life jacket. It's like a safety preserve for when I dive too far into the deep end and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in over my head. When in reality, I'm not. I just need to refocus and, sit back down and remind myself like why I'm doing this. And I think for a lot of people, running like provides so much. It gives us so much. It gives us community. It gives us a sense of belonging. It gives us the ability to try new things and to do hard things and to really understand and believe that you can do hard things. Like I don't always get that from my job. So sometimes doing a really hard workout in the middle of the week reminds me that, I am strong and I'm capable and I can set goals and achieve them. So I think that keeping that in mind is so important, especially as we end the year and we start to, begin new training cycles and new training blocks. So, and Sarah's here. This is perfect timing. So I know we talked about this as coaches too. And Sarah brought up a really amazing book that she's been reading that I haven't cracked open quite yet, but I am very excited to. It's Addie Bracey's Training for Mental Toughness book. And I think that this is a really good reference to have. Yeah, she's showing you the cover of it when sort of thinking through some of these things. So Sarah, I'll catch up really quick.
Yeah.
We kind of went through some.
I've been here.
Oh, awesome. Okay, cool. Is there anything you want to add, or I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So, one of the things that she really highlights in the book that I think is really important is connecting your why to your core values. So, it's good to start with those questions about like, why do I run? What do I get out of this? What does it bring to me? But also just starting with like, what motivates me? What inspires me? What gives me strength? How do I want to be remembered? What are some other questions? What gives me purpose? So starting with those things and like doing some self-reflection on like who you are, like what makes you tick, what's your life about? What jazzes you up and like what's like moving you forward, and then looking at those things and seeing how you connect them to your running. How does running work to like meet those values, So if hard work is a value for you, how does running relate to hard work, right? And so connecting those things. And then Yeah, I think just like, oh, so she talks about your what's, so like your races or your goals being your what's and not your why. So your what's are like how you achieve your why. So taking that step back and seeing how you can link those smaller things to the bigger purpose that you're seeing. And I think the point that you guys made about like revisiting this is super important, because we are evolving, changing people all the time, and our values, even like where, you have your core of who you are, but still as you change, and your life changes, like your values shift and different things have priority. And it's important that you know what those are, so that you can keep that momentum going with running. And so, yeah, I think like Kristen said, doing it annually, or Drew said, between training cycles. And I think another thing is just if you're recognizing that you're struggling to motivate, or you're having signs of burnout, or nothing is like sparking you, you're not really feeling motivated, like that's a really good time to pull back and take a look at things and reflect on things a little bit. But also, it's really important to know that having a why, there's evidence linking it to enhanced performance. So people are actually more successful if they can hold on to a why. And I was reading alongside this, I was reading the book, Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And he's a psychiatrist who was in a concentration camp during World War II. And he talks all about the having a why as being like, how people were able to survive those difficult times. And so he really links that. And he says, somebody who has, if you have a why, you can withstand most any how. And I think that's a really great thing to think about when coming up with a why, that when you have a reason for something, then it makes the suffering that you'll inevitably experience during a difficult race worthwhile.
Absolutely. I love that book, Sarah. The Man's Search for Meaning. I think I've read it and I've listened to it, and I've read it and listened to it at the same time. I feel like every time I go back to that book, I pick out another piece of information that resonates so strongly with me in that moment. It's kind of one of those books that you just hold on to forever, and you can go back to and be like, oh, this didn't make sense 5 years ago, but it makes sense to me right now in this moment. And that's powerful. I think Addie's book does that too in a lot of ways. I've skimmed through it a bit, but I got it based off of your recommendation. And I love Addie. I've worked with her before, and like everything that she says just resonates so strongly in my mind. And so I am so thrilled that she's able to share her genius with the world in the form of this book. So yeah, I think also to what Sarah said is like, you're really sitting down and you're thinking about who you are, what you believe in, what your principles are, what your values are, and who you want to be at your core. Like the idea of like, how do you want people to remember you, is such a good question. It's like such an important, powerful question, because it's not just a matter of like how people remember you at the trail, whether or not you say thank you to, whoever's handing out Snickers bars, but how do you react in the grocery store when someone accidentally bumps into you and you're having a bad day? It applies to different areas of life. And I think that we talk about it a lot on here, but this is another example of running makes you better, period, in every aspect of life. Being mindful about the reason you do things, taking other people's circumstances into consideration, problem solving on the fly a lot of times. I think that all of that's really, really just crazy powerful and makes a huge difference whether you're running that day or not. So I think when you sit down and you start asking yourself these questions, some of them will be harder to answer than others, and that's okay. Just keep in mind that we're all here to run, but we're also here to become better people. And I think that keeping that in mind will help stir some authentic answers that you might be looking for.
I think it helps too with like the laying the bricks and like, you know, if I have these goals or this is this type of person I want to be, then what am I doing today and in this moment that supports that vision, you know? And like, yeah, you know, maybe today I'm not there where I kind of see myself being one day perhaps, but like I am like here right now and I have all this power in the present moment, and how can I live today in a way that aligns myself with that place that I want to go? And so having that vision or those ideals that can give some guidance for those decisions in the day to day.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, Sarah, so the next kind of question that ties into this is like, basically what you just said is, what am I doing today that can get me to where I want to be? So when, as coaches, we talk about goal setting, you know, there are different kinds of goals. There are sub goals, and then there are long-term goals. So I think that, can you sort of define what the difference is between those and how you like to set goals with your athletes and clients?
Well, I think more in terms of like process-oriented goals versus like objective-oriented. I can't even think of the other word now, but process-oriented goals being like where it's all at for me. And, you know, and that's really about focusing on the things that you can control, and the things that, yeah, like we don't want to say, oh, I want to place in a race because we don't know who the other competitor, or I tend to encourage people to think about other goals than placing, because, you know, we can't control who the other competitors are. We can't control what kind of day they're having. And we want to pull back and focus on the things that we can control. And then really starting with like those process oriented goals, like what, you know, eating. So I just raced this weekend, and my like primary goal number one was to eat at 60 minutes and every 30 minutes thereafter. And I looked at my watch at 59 minutes and 40 seconds. And I was so proud of myself for getting my gel in before the 60-minute mark. And like, that was a thing that I could control, and I did it, and I was proud of myself, you know, and it didn't really like matter what my time goals and races is so hard because the courses and everything makes, you know, it's apples and oranges. But yeah, what can you control? And like, how do those things you can control relate to the why? So like you were saying, like if I want to be a kind person and a warm person, and part of my why is a sense of community, then I'm going to interact with the other competitors and with the folks out on the course, and the aid station volunteers and the race director in that way that enhances community and creates warmth and like makes people feel welcome, right? Because that's like part of my why. And so thinking about, so both setting goals that are things that you can control, and then also setting goals that relate to your why and to the person that you are. And then the idea is that you will lead by managing the process goals, like eating and, you know, starting slow and smiling and being in the present moment and taking care of small niggles when they come up. You're going to have a strong race, right? And then maybe some of those more specific goals that you had, time goals and those sorts of things, will happen. But you don't want to focus on those things. You want to focus on the things that you can control.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that listening to Sarah actually made me think about was, wow, sorry, like, it's a book that I've been reading, and I sent it to a few friends last year, but it's by Dr. Jim Lohr, who's this like, you know, renowned psychiatrist. He's like a sports psychiatrist. So he goes through a series of questions and talks about like finding your why having a why in general is important. And he goes into a lot of different tangents and stories, but one that resonated the most with me was actually during a podcast that he did with Tim Ferriss. I think he did this podcast about a year ago. And I probably listened to this thing like 3 times, like over and over and over, just to like make sure I was getting all the pieces of it. But the idea of, being an athlete and having a why is so important, because there are a lot of people, like you can think of athletes like Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods, who just like, objectively might not have been great humans, or might have held on to resentment from their past. And just maybe there are other athletes that are great athletes, but not great humans. Like that's not what we're here for. So I think really like tapping into you and your core values and who you want to be is so much more important than setting a goal to, podium at some arbitrary race. That's not going to make you a better person. And I think that controlling what you can is, it's one thing, and letting go of what you can't control is another. But I think it's also important to note that, like, we've all probably learned this in so many ways throughout COVID, that like, it's really your reaction to things that you can't control that determine your character. And so, having a strong why really helps in those situations. The world can feel like it's falling apart, or getting out the door can feel very difficult, but knowing your why and holding on to that and like staying true to yourself is so important.
I also think it's really important for folks to know that if your why is simply like, it makes me feel good and I need time alone, that is a completely appropriate why for running. And like, especially I know parents, like maybe the total thing with running is like, it gets me out of the house for hours a week. And sometimes that can feel like, is it guilty? Is it selfish that my why is just like about myself? But taking care of yourself and loving yourself and giving yourself something that makes you feel good and makes you empowered and takes care of your nervous system and takes care of your body is not selfish. And so just like, we're talking about these values and these big goals and things like that, but like, if it's something more simple than that, that's good too. Like valuing yourself is a really important why.
Yep. Agreed. Drew, what do you think? I know that like as I guess you're not a new parent, but you're a new parent to 2 kids. So finding time and maybe even just like a couple moments alone is probably something that's important to you.
Yeah, I was just thinking like all these podcasts and books that I've been like writing this whole list. I have no time. Like, I don't know when I'm going to read this stuff. I don't know when I'm going to listen. Like, I don't even have enough time to sleep 6 hours a night, let alone do all this other stuff. But I like just thoughts listening to you. Just honestly, both of you girls are so brilliant. The process oriented goal setting is amazing. And it reminds me of a couple athletes that I've got that have, you think like when you're setting short-term and long-term goals, like you might be like, well, I have lots of short-term goals to get to where I can race a certain race, and you mark it on your calendar. But we're not out of this COVID thing yet. I mean, there are different places all over the world whose governments are regulating this or that, and it's really difficult. And still, athletes being impacted and their races canceled or moved or all that kind of stuff. And like Kristen said, being, I guess, flexible and how you respond to that adversity when your major long-term goal seems like it's swiped away from you right when you've trained to get there, is so important. Trying to stay positive and put a spin on things and talk to your coach and figure out like, well, let's figure out a plan B, C, and D kind of thing is so important. But picking goals, and not to dissuade away from like the finding your why thing, but picking goals, both short-term and long-term, can still be kind of difficult. But again, those process-oriented goals, like seriously tonight, like everyone needs to like sit down, like I've been doing here on your paper, and just like write down like maybe just 3 different process-oriented goals that you're going to be looking at doing maybe over the next 6 months or whatnot. I just super healthy and very insightful by y'all.
Yeah, I really love that, Drew. And I think too, the one thing that we haven't touched on yet is the fact that like because everything is up in the air, and it seems like there's a new variant every month that comes through, which is terrifying. That, like, I don't know if you need permission or to hear someone else say it, but celebrating the victories, how doesn't matter how small they are, celebrate the little things, celebrate getting out the door, 45 seconds before you planned on it. Like, give yourself a high five, like this is hard stuff. We are living in unprecedented times, and taking the time to be proud of yourself is not selfish. Telling yourself that you're doing a good job, not weird. Like, it's okay to celebrate these things. It's actually very important to celebrate these things. And as your coaches, we are here in a way, like we're your little cheerleaders in your back pocket at all times. But having that sort of like self-love and self-compassion and self-awareness, like if you really need a pep talk during the day, like you can give yourself that pep talk. It's like I can't remember who said so David and Megan Roach talk about it in their book and on the podcast. I think it's Terrell Owens when he says, I love me some me. And that is like the perfect example for this, because like, isn't that what everyone really needs right now? And just like all the time, I do. It's not weird for me to like talk to myself and be like, oh, you are awesome. I can't believe you got outside and you did that in 15 degrees. Yes. Good job. So it's not weird. And I mean, it might be weird if like, I don't know. There are ways it could be weird, but it's not weird.
It's not weird. I try to, with all my athletes, I try to make a big deal out of just completing a week. Right now with the weather the way it is and COVID and just like everything that we've been dealing with for what seems like a couple years now, every single Sunday, I'm like, hey, let's party. Like, we just had an awesome week of training. Like, let's go buy something tasty, just like, let's go do something fun. But yes, small victories need to be celebrated just as much as the big ones.
Yeah, I love that.
I also love that because I know you're not on Insta anymore, Kristen, but my Insta post last Friday was don't forget to celebrate the small things. So, and was talking just about that. So it's perfect that you brought that up today, because I do
finally channeling like your superpowers. That's so cool. I love it. I think, one other thing that's really important about, celebrating the small victories and being proud of yourself is, like with the time change and the seasons difference, and it's darker, longer, it's colder, it's, it's tough. And a lot of times, I mean, I've definitely been affected by seasonal affective disorder, or get like, what some athletes call like seasonal blues. And that's a real thing, like I don't think that there should be a stigma around that, because it's much harder for me to get out if it's dark and cold than it is if, when the sun's up at 6 a.m. and it's already 70 degrees. Like, I would much rather do that. So I think that this is kind of like a transition into talking about like the mental health aspects of having a why, being proud of yourself, being stoked on you, but also like how to manage seasonal affective disorder or any type of like seasonal mood change, and continue training at the same time.
I'm sure it's different for everybody, but something that I do that really helps me is I try to involve myself more with my friends. I don't get the opportunity to run in groups as much as I used to, but sometimes it's helpful where if I can't run with like a small group, like a few days a week, I'll try to make sure, like, well, at least my long run, I'm going to make sure I call friend, call family member, even if it's just talking on the phone or something like that during the run. It seems to help me stay motivated. It kind of helps, I guess, me feel better. I don't know how else to say it. I just feel better when I'm around people. I know, again, it's different for everybody, but that's a tip that I use really almost seasonally, especially when it's getting dark early and staying darker later. Like, it just really helps to have others in your corner being your cheerleader the whole time. it's kind of like what we just talked about, like loving you some you. Sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes you need other people to love you too and cheer you up. And that helps me.
That's such a great point, Drew. And that's definitely like being social is a really good thing to help if you're dealing with seasonal affective disorder. And just because isolating is usually a thing that we do when we're starting to feel a little bit sad, we tend to cut ourselves off from people who can support us. And it's sort of like a chicken egg sort of thing. So if you notice that, definitely wanting to reach out to your social supports. And then the other thing that can happen is because our races are over now, our output is going down. So you want to try to stick to a schedule as much as possible. And like, if all of a sudden you have all this dead time because you were like crazy busy with training, and then it feels like, oh, it's going to be great, I'm going to have so much free time, but then you don't know what to do with that free time. So scheduling things out, replacing, if your runs are now a little bit shorter, adding some yoga or some sort of cross training can be good. Doing what you can in the sunlight. So if you can get out for a walk during your lunch hour, if you like opening windows or blinds inside your house, like it literally affects us to have exposure to vitamin D. And so if you can make it a point to get that sunshine, that's really good. Vitamin D supplements are also a good idea. And then like anything that you would typically do for, self-care, and like, again, self-care is not like bubble baths and like one time, like feel good things. Bubble baths. Self-care is stress management long-term. It's adulting. So like paying your bills on time and or keeping things organized and being on top of your stuff can be good. So you like stay ahead of the overwhelm. But then, yeah, like what are those little dopamine things that like what makes you feel good? Is there a place that you like to go to eat? A bubble bath is a good thing. We just can't totally depend on those things. So like those little things that make you feel good, building them in is good as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I typically in the winter, Sarah, I like to think of myself as a houseplant where I am solar powered. I am always vitamin D deficient. That's something I'm constantly working on. So anytime I get an opportunity, even just to like, if I'm in a Zoom call or on a meeting or working on a project and I can sit with the shades up and the sun just like pouring in through the window, that is like a good moment for me, and sometimes it's, hey, I've got 30 minutes. I can take Avalanche on a walk outside in the middle of the day. Like, again, celebrating the small things, paying a bill on time. Heck yeah, that's amazing. Like we're all adults. We can do this, So I think that keeping in mind that self-care is, it's not just bubble baths. It's not a massage. It's not painting your nails. It's not whatever Cosmopolitan magazine says it is. It is, being the hero of your own story. It is taking care of yourself. It's taking care of the people around you when you have the capacity to, and being, really compassionate and patient with yourself, because this shit is hard. It doesn't happen overnight, and I think even just like taking a couple of moments, like we talked about meditation a lot. TJ brought up the Waking Up app in one of the last newsletters. And I love Sam Harris. I've been using him for 2 years now. It's been a night and day difference. And I think that the people around me have noticed that as well. I know I've noticed it within myself. And even just taking those 10 minutes to just breathe and focus and, stay calm is really powerful, makes a huge difference. And I think that really ties into the idea of like the sub goals with the longer term goals too, because 10 minutes a day in the scheme of a day it's nothing. I can waste 10 minutes doing a lot of things. But being mindful about those 10 minutes and keeping a routine with the Waking Up app or Sam Harris or whatever meditation form you use, pays off pretty big, 2 years later. And like when I started meditation, I was like, I don't have the capacity for this. I have massive shiny object syndrome. How am I going to sit still for 10 minutes? And now I wake up and I look forward to it. Like those are the 10 minutes of my day that really like, you know, wipe the slate clean and get me ready to just take on whatever like comes during the day. So I love that, Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can't recommend anything more than mindfulness. I think it can be just like the most important thing to add to, you know, whether it's just like taking care of yourself or your mental health or whatever. It's super important. And all of this is making me think of another important thing is like just perspective. So I read that there's this book called Wintering by Catherine May. And it's about, the concept is essentially like everything in nature rests annually, at least for like a big chunk of time, right? Like plants for like a whole few months, and then they get to rest, and then they blossom and they're beautiful and we enjoy them. And then they like let down their leaves and then they go and rest again. And we like let that happen. And this happens with everything in nature. It has their seasons. And as humans, we have managed to create artificial light and do all of these things that make it so we don't ever have to rest. We don't have to follow nature's natural cycles or patterns. And what that means is that when the opportunity for rest presents itself, we are like really resistant to it because it doesn't like, it's not naturally in our lives, right? And we feel like, well, should I rest? Because I could work all night. I have my computer at home, and should I rest or can I stay late? Because maybe the sun has set, but I can turn the lights on and keep working, right? And so here, you know, it's the winter and we're maybe taking a step back in training or things are slowing down and we can feel antsy about that. And so just a reminder that like, we're in a season of rest, right? You have that season of rest and that's good. It's from the season of rest that the growth comes. So if you find yourself needing to pull back and take space and relax a little, like don't worry about what's going to come after that, because most everything else in nature has something really awesome that comes after the period of rest.
Yeah, I agree. And that reminds me of, I feel like I hear and see this all the time now, but the idea that stress plus rest, you know, really leaning in hard on the rest equals growth. Because you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to take the time to let yourself rebuild, recalibrate, you know, really just reset. It's okay. And I think that in our society today, where everything is so quick and everything has to be done yesterday, and whoever is the busiest is the best, or the more important, like most important, like none of that is true. We have, you know, as a society, we have sort of like normalized this idea of like, go, 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 go. Like you have to go further. You have to go faster. You have to do more, be more, achieve more to be whole. And that's crazy. Like that is the most wild thought ever. I think that like as humans, we are already whole and we are doing what we can. So I think taking the time to rest and reset, like you during a rest period or a rest season, like take that time and like really take advantage of it. Because if you're, you know, like I know you guys, we're all athletes. I coach some of you on the call. Like I know how big your goals are. I know how big my goals are. And taking advantage of the couple of weeks or months that you have to really let your body soak up the adaptations and all of the work and every stress, everything that you've put into it for the past year, like it's really exciting to think about how much bigger your goals will get if you treat yourself and your body right now. So that's, I think this conversation could go on for a very long time, and I would likely repeat myself in a lot of different ways, but I'd be saying the same things. So I definitely want to reiterate that, like, you don't have to, you know, have back to back Zoom meetings. You don't have to be too busy for a friend's phone call or anything like that. Like, you know, there are times when we are all very busy. And I think that those are the times to really like take take them one breath at a time, one step at a time, one day at a time. But don't feel bad if you're not doing what, you know, Jane Doe is doing on Instagram, or if your, you know, Strava history isn't a straight line with consistent runs, you know, like don't be hyper judgmental of yourself, because everyone's on a different path. Everyone has different goals. This is, you know, this is the fun part of life, and we get to decide how, you know, how we move forward. Our perspective creates our reality. So I think taking care of yourself, being as positive and optimistic as you can is so important. I'm not going to cry. I might. But guys, this is important. It's really important to take care of yourselves. It's super important to rest. And I'm psyched that you're all here. This is really, really cool, because I know how much you guys care about this. I know how much we as coaches care about this, and we want the best for you. So yeah, Sarah, do you have anything else to say?
No, yeah, I think that's all good. And I think, you know, it's really hard this time of year. Yeah, it's just hard. I mean, it's just hard in general. Not feeling pulled in 100 directions. So like, if if you do feel like you're burning the candle at both ends, just know, like, we understand that it's really hard, and you know, we have so many responsibilities and so many things calling us. And like, when we say, hey, you should rest, and you're like, great, well, I'd love to, but my life is sort of crazy. We really like hear you and see that. And this isn't about making you feel bad for not being able to rest. Right. But, you know, we want to really support you. And here's your coaches, like, and helping you find that space in your life. And like making room for you with the other things that you have going on. And so, you know, rest is not necessarily easy to come by, especially when you have big goals. And people here, like, right, you do have big goals. That's why you're here. And you're probably showing up in big ways in the other parts of your life, because those are the types of folks that we get here at Microcosm, which is awesome. And it's really hard. And so I just want to like name that, you know, like, it's hard. Don't feel like not resting is now something you have to feel bad about. But you deserve to rest. And that's the part that we want you to take away. Like, you deserve to rest. And if you have something in the back of your head telling you not to, and that's your voice, we want that voice to be quiet, and want you to hear that voice telling you that you're allowed to rest.
Yeah. And if you're afraid of rest, or you're afraid of, you know, what we as coaches might say, talk to us about it. Let us know how you feel. Leave those comments in your training log. If you're having, you know, if you're having those sorts of thoughts where it's like, oh, I can't rest. I took last week off because I was sick, and now I have to go, you know, 110%. Talk to your coach, because chances are those are like the gremlins talking, and we're not going to let that happen. So,
and if we need to say, hey, like, let's talk about goals, or let's talk about your training and like the role that training's having in your life. Is it feeling like more stress than fun right now? Right? Like, that's a good thing for us to talk about. And we're here for that. And like, sometimes reevaluating our goals, or admitting that like, hey, I thought I was going to be able to handle this training, but like life is crazy. That can be really hard, but we are your support in that. Like,
yep.
We are not expecting you to do some race because we've been training you for it, right? Like, if that conversation needs to happen, like, we are here to help think about the way that running is a great positive in your life, and not this extra stressor. That's really like what we're all about, I think.
Yep, absolutely. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's such a small thing in the scheme of life. And as a lot, like, as some people say, like, we are all just like illusions of grandeur. So it's the fact, like, the idea that you can push through hard things, you can achieve hard things, you can do hard things is great. You can also rest. So, we can end it with that. I'm sorry, I got a little emotional earlier, you guys. I'm super embarrassed. This was an excellent call, though. I think that we touched on a lot of really important topics, especially over the holidays, where, you know, people respond and have different emotional connections and reactions to holidays. Some, you know, some people have difficult families that they go back to. Some people have wonderful families that they get to go home to. So it's all very different. And I think that no matter where you're, you know, where you're from or who you're spending the holidays with, like, just know that you're loved and rest is a good thing and your coaches adore you. We love being here. This is the highlight of my week, getting to talk to you guys. So just keep that in mind, and, you know, we're here for you. So let us know how we can help. Cool. All right. Well, have a good week, you guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.